So since this year we're gonna have 2 days, I split the lecture materials into two. So today I'll talk a little bit more about 5-block method, which I introduced in Riichi Book 1. So materials for day 1 are more like a refresher reviews for beginners and intermediate players. And then on day 2, tomorrow, I'm going to talk about calling judgment, which I didn't cover quite a bit in Riichi Book 1. So this is this should be pretty new to those who have read Riichi Book 1. So that tomorrow's material will be more advanced. Right. So I'll try to explain the 5-block method in a different way than in a way that is different from Riichi Book 1. So hopefully, even though it's a review, it will be somewhat useful for those who have read Riichi Book 1. Right. So the 5-block method. So the key to 5-block method is these following three steps. Step 1 is to divide and count. Divide the hand into parts and count the number of blocks. Step 2 is to compare and choose. And step 3 involves judging some exceptional situations. I'll talk a little more about each of the 3 steps in detail. So step 1, count the number of blocks. More specifically, we need to know if the number of blocks are less than 5, 4 or fewer, or more more than 5, 6 or more, or exactly 5. It is important because what we're going to do in step 2 will depend on how many blocks you have in your hand. When the number of blocks is less than 5 or fewer, then step 2 involves choosing which floating tiles to keep. When the number of blocks is greater than 5, then you're going to have to choose which blocks to keep. When n is 5, then step 2 involves choosing which additional tiles to keep. So I'll talk more about each of these 3 things, each of these 3 cases in details in a minute. And then the last step involves judging some exceptional situations. Right, so let's just review the first step, counting the number of blocks in a hand. So how do we divide the hand, this hand, into blocks? How many blocks do we have here? Yeah, so it's easy to identify this block, 1, 2, 3, and then 4 and 5, right? So 5 blocks. I mean, regardless of how we view this block, it's 2 blocks, right? So block can be completed run or incomplete run, float run, or pairs, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's very easy. How about now? How do we divide the hand? And how many blocks are there? 6. So again, start with easy one, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6.
Because I counted 2, 3, and 3, 4 as 2.
Right. So
Possible blocks?
1, 2.
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, that's one way. Another way to look at it. But we have at least 5. Right? Potentially, these 3 could be the 5th, could be the 6th block. But at least we have 5. We have five blocks plus some additional ones, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4. So I mean we have 2 blocks in pin circle tiles, 2 blocks in bamboo tiles. So we only need 1 block in characters. So we view this tile as a floating tile, which could be turned into an additional block, but this is right now this is a floating tile, a tile that is floating around, right? So not all hands have exactly 5 blocks. Some hands may have 4 or fewer, some hands may have 6 or more. So what we do, as I said, what we do in step 2 depends on the number of blocks in a hand. Right? Again, how do we divide a hand into blocks, and how many blocks are there? 5. So we can easily identify 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So 4 blocks plus some floating tiles, right? The floating tiles can become a 5th block, but we have 4 blocks, right? 4 blocks plus these additional ones, right? So these these additional tiles are called floating tiles. Floating tiles are tiles that are not blocks in themselves, but can become an additional block, right? So once we complete the first step, the next step is to compare and choose which tiles to keep or which blocks to keep. And as I said, that depends on the number of blocks in hand. So let's first look at the case where we have 4 or fewer blocks in hand. Right, so our next task is to compare and choose which floating tiles to keep. Right, so what we need to know is what kind of floating tiles are better to keep, right? In choosing which floating tiles to discard. And this shows the ranking of floating tiles in the order of importance. So the most important, most useful floating tiles are those tiles that are part of what's called 4-tile combination, right? Followed by isolated tiles between 3 and 7, where 3 and 7 are the most useful compared with tiles between 4 and 6. I explained why this is the case last year. Do you guys remember? Why 3 and 7 are more useful than 4, 5, and 6?
The reason?
Yeah, the reasons. So or why are they more useful than 2, 8, and 1, 9? Let's start with that.
Mm-hmm.
Why isolated 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 more useful than 2 and 8? And why 2 and 8 more useful than 1 and 9?
Because we wait for much more tiles to make a good block out of it.
That's right. So 1 and 9 will never become side weight proton, right? If it can become a pair, it can become edge weight block, it can become closed weight block, but it will never become side weight proton. Whereas 2 and 8 can become side weight proton if we draw 3 or if we draw 7, right? But if we draw 1, it will become edge weight. If we draw 9, it will become edge weight. So there are more chances for this to become a side weight compared with this, but 3 and 7 are better than 2 and 8 because these can become a side weight proton with 2 kinds of tiles, right? For 3, 2 and 4, right? For 4, 3 and 5, right? Then the question is why 3 and 7 more useful than 4, 5, and 6?
I don't know if this is the correct answer, but I remember that waiting for 1 and 4 is better than waiting for
2 and 5 or 3 and
yes.
3 and 6, right? So there are some ranking among the side weight protons, right? Side weight protons are better than closed weight or edge weight, but among side weight protons, some are better than others, right? So 1 4 weight is better than 2 5 weight or 3 6 weight or 4 7 weight because tiles closer to terminals are more likely to be discarded, right? So that's why we value 3 and 7 over 4, 5, 6, right? But they are all good, and followed by two isolated 2 and 8, isolated 1 and 9, and, and then isolated honor tiles, and then the least useful ones are so-called suji tiles. For example, when you have 4, 1 is a suji tile, and then it's not useful, right? The reason is that as long as you have 4, you can accept 2 and 3, even without having 1 anyway, right? There are some exceptional things, and I'll talk about these in a minute. Right. So first, 4 tile combination are the most useful ones, and there are 2 kinds of 4 tile combinations. One is called a stretch single. It's basically 4 consecutive tiles. The strongest among 4 tile combinations are the middle ones, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 3, 4, 5, 6. 6. They can create 2 sideways protons with, when you draw 3, or when you draw 5, or when you draw 6, or when you draw 8, right? So they are much stronger than an isolated 4 or isolated 7, right? If 4 is a part of 4 consecutive tiles. Keep in mind that the stretch single with terminals are not as useful. For example, 1, 2, 3, 4 is only barely better than an isolated 4. The reason is that if you draw, well, you can't draw this, right? When you draw 2, it only creates H weight / closed weight, right? 1, 2, or 2, 4. Only if you draw 3 or 5, it can create 2 sideways protons. So terminal ones are not as useful. And then the following 2 would be in between these 2, right? They are the most useful, second best, and not so useful, right? So when you have a floating tile that makes up these 4 consecutive tile combinations, then you just keep them, right? Second kind of 4 tile combination is nakabukure shape or bulging float shape. For example, 3, 4, 4, 5 or 4, 5, 5, 6, right? So just one extra middle tile, right? So this is useful because drawing 2 and 5 will create 2 sideways proton, or one run plus sideways proton, or drawing 3 and 6 also create 1 sideways proton, right? And again, those shapes that contain terminals are not as useful, right? Here, drawing 6 would not be particularly thrilling because this will only create edge weight or closed weight, right? Drawing 1 or 4 is not so useful. Right. So 4 tile combination, the best. Then followed by isolated 3, 7, then 2, 8, and 1, 9. These are pretty straightforward, right? I think. And then only after you discard those only after you you exhaust these floating number tiles, and then you choose among isolated honor tiles. Right? So among honor tiles, there are some ranking as well. The most useful ones to keep are your own seed tiles. Right? For example, west when you are west. Right? This is the the most useful because only you can make use of it as a fun pipe. Followed by dragon tile, right? White, green, and red dragons, and then prevailing wind tile. The reason why this is more useful than this to keep, or the reason why you may want to discard this first rather than this, is that prevailing wind tiles can become too fun yaku for other players, right? East in East round can be a double tone. South in South round could become double South, or it's too fun for another player. So you'd rather discard this first rather than this, right? And then value is win tile. So you'd better discard this first, this next, this, and then this, right? Right. And I also I've already explained why switch tiles are the least useful. Now we're gonna talk a little bit more about some exceptional situations, right? So Dora tile, when you have Dora tile, then you can change the ranking a little bit. For example, if isolated honor tile is a Dora tile, then roughly speaking, two ranks up, you can discard these first rather than this. So this is all to make this decision-making process more systematic, so that you can make decisions quickly, so that you can spend your time on some other things, right? So the other 2 points are not so intuitive as the first point. A tile next to a triplet should mean down 1 rank. So this may be a little bit confusing, so I'll explain this in a bit. And then tile next to a run is up 1 rank, right? So let's first talk about a tile next to a triplet. So for example, when you have a tile combination like 7, 8, 8, 8, this 7 should be 1 rank down, right? If you compare this 7 with an isolated 7, for example, 7 in bamboo, where you don't have any bamboo tiles, then this should be less useful than an isolated 7, right? So the reason why this 7 is not useful is that this 7 can become a sideways proton only when you draw another 8 or the last 8, right? I mean, this becomes a proper sideways proton only if you draw the fourth 8, which is not very likely. Even when you draw 6, it's not a very good sideways proton because you're using up as many as 3 waiting tiles in your own hand, right? So instead of 8 waiting tiles, you only get 5 winning tiles, right? So when your hand has 4 or fewer blocks, then a tile next to a triplet is a weaker floating tile than an isolated floating tile. So this might be, I thought this might be a little bit confusing because we tend to think that connected shapes are stronger than isolated tile shapes, right? When you would think that this could become a 3-sided weight, 6, 9, 7 weight. So we tend to think that the tile next to a triplet is actually stronger, but it's in fact the opposite. So to understand this, compare two hands. So I say this is weaker when the hand has 4 or fewer blocks. When it is not, this is actually strong, right? So compare these two hands. So how many blocks do we have above, in the hand above? 1, 2, this could be 2, this could be 2, right? An important part of point about the hand above is that there is no pair, there is no head at the moment. So when your hand is a headless hand with sufficient number of blocks, then 7 shaped like this, a tile next to a triplet is actually strong. So you better choose. So the choice here is between 1 character, 7B, and 2 bamboo. But among them, this is the least useful. So you discard 2 bamboo. But when your hand doesn't have a sufficient number of blocks, for example, in hand like this, 1 block here, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then we are comparing among 3 floating tiles, 7 bamboo, 7 circle, and 7 character. Then this is the least useful, right? So we're basically comparing among 7 of 3 different colors, right? Completely isolated 7, 7 next to a triplet, and 7 next to a run, right? Among them, this is actually the least useful, right? Because this can become side weight with 8 and 6, proper side weight proton. This can become either 2-sided weight with 8, or with 6, it can become 3-sided weight, right? But this will not, first of all, in order for this to become a proper side weight, you need to draw 8. But you are using 3 copies of 8 already, right? Even if you draw 6, you are using up winning tiles in your hand, right? So this is actually the least useful, right? So when your hand has 4 or fewer, a tile next to a triplet is 1 rank down, right? The last bullet point, right? So we covered this, we covered this. The last bullet point is that a tile next to a run is up 1 rank, right? So, for example, if 1 is isolated, it's weak, but when it's combined with 3, 4, 5, it becomes as valuable or slightly more valuable compared with isolated 2 or 8, right? So that's what I mean by up by 1 rank, right? So the reason is that when you have 3, 4, 5, in addition to 1, a draw of 2 will create a side weight, 3, 6 weight, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Or a draw of 6 will create closed weight in addition to a draw of 3, right? Right. So yeah, I have covered all the points of the ranking. Right. So let's now do some exercise. So how do we divide this hand, and how many blocks are there, and what tile to discard? How many blocks? 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean 3 complete runs plus this, so definitely 4 blocks, right? So when you have 4 blocks, the choice is among floating tiles, right? So which tiles are floating? 9 bamboo, 1 character, and 7 circle, right? But 7 circle is connected, so the choice, the real choice is between 1 character and 9 bamboo, right? So which one to discard? 9 bamboo. Why?
Because 1 is connected to 3.
Right. So this is completely isolated, whereas that is next to a run. So that's 1 rank up. So that you keep that and you discard that, right? How about now? How many blocks? And what to discard? 4. Yeah. So 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? I mean, we may not want to count this as 1 and this as 1, but we have no choice, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. So still we are comparing floating tiles, right? Because we don't have sufficient number of blocks, right? So the floating tiles are 8, and 7, and 3, right? Right. So we're going to keep 8 because it is a part of a 4-tile combination, right? We're going to keep 3 because it's next to a rung, right? 1 rung up. The real choice is between 4 and 7, right? And as it happens, they constitute suji tiles, right? So it's less useful, right, than an isolated isolated 4, for example, right? So I would say discard 4. The reason is that 7 and 3 are more useful compared with 4, 5, and 6, right? Right. So now we have covered case 1 where n is less than 5. Now we're going to talk about the case where n is greater than 5, right? So the number of blocks is greater than 5. Then our choice is which blocks to keep, right? So this is relatively easy because often we can easily identify which blocks are less useful than others. So what kind of blocks are better to keep? The most useful block to keep is sideway protrans for obvious reasons. We have more winning tiles. The second best blocks to keep are those protrans that can accept 5 or more tiles. So for example, 446 can accept 5 or more tiles, right? It can accept 4, right? Or it can accept 5, right? So 2 copies of 4 and 4 copies of 5, right? So in total, it can accept 6 tiles, right? 246, it can accept 8 tiles, right? 4 copies of 3 and 4 copies of 5, right? It can accept 2 copies of 9 and 4 copies of 8, right? So those protrans that can accept 5 or more are the second best. Followed by closed weight protrans, like 1, 3, or 2, 4, or 7, 9. And pairs when you have 2 pairs. When you have 3 pairs in hand, pairs are the least useful blocks to keep. Right? So depending on the number of pairs in hand, you may want to keep a pair or you may want to discard a pair. So the next one is edge weight protrans, right? So you discard from the pair when you have 3 pairs in hand. Then you move on to edge weight and then closed weight, and then discard this, and then when you have 2 or more sideway protrans, you choose between them. Right. So let's do some more exercise. How many blocks and which blocks are weaker than others? We have 6, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So which ones should we keep? So side weight protrans 2, 3, 7, 8, we'll keep them, right? 2, 3, 3 also very strong, so we'll keep them, right? So the choice is between 9, 9, green dragons, and 3, 3, 5, right? So among them, this is stronger because it can accept 5 or more tiles, right? 4 copies of 4 and 2 copies of 3, right? So we keep them. And choosing between this and this, since this is 1 pipe, we keep them, right? So we discard 9, right? Isolated pair. Another reason is that we have 3 pairs in hand, so we discard the pairs are least useful, right? So now we're going to talk about the last case where we have exactly 5 blocks in hand. Right. So when you have exactly 5 blocks, an additional tile could be categorized into 3 different tiles. One is a floating tile that we have talked about, a tile that is not related to any of the blocks in the hand. It's just floating around, and that can become an extra block, right? But since we have exactly 5 blocks in the hand, we may not need floating tile. The other 2 kinds are purely redundant tiles, tiles that you don't need for the purpose of winning your hand, and supporting tiles, or supporting tiles, right? So there are only 20 tiles in this hand. So we're gonna think about some additional tiles, right? So an example of redundant tiles are some unrelated honor tiles, right? So this would be an example of redundant tiles, not related to any of the blocks in the hand, right? Or 9-pin, 9-circle, or one character would be a redundant tile, right? Those redundant tiles that we keep for the purpose of defense, such as rest, are called safe tiles. Right? Tiles that are connected to one of the blocks in the hand are called supporting tiles. Right? So for example, 5 man could be considered as supporting tiles, because this allows the hand to accept more tiles, right? So since we have an additional 5 man, we can accept 2 more copies of 1 pin, 1 circle, right?
Good.
When this becomes a triplet, this can become a pair, right? Also, additional 5 man means that you can accept another copy of 5 itself, right? So having this increases the tile acceptance by 4 tiles, right? 2 more copies of this and 2 more copies of this. So it is supporting, right? So it's different from redundant tiles, right? The last set of the last category is floating tile. So let's say we have 6 bamboo. Having 6 bamboo will allow you to accept 4-7 bamboo, for example, or 5-8 bamboo, right? And then once we draw 4-7 or 5-8, then you're gonna discard 5 and 7 character, because we have sideways proton, so this is less useful now, right? So a tile that allows you to accept more tiles to have more blocks we'll call floating tiles, right? Floating tiles are tiles that are floating, and that can later become another block, right? So now that we can distinguish among 3 different kinds of additional tiles, right? When we have exactly 5 blocks in the hand, we choose among them. So we're going to talk about when this is more important than this, or when this is more important than this, or when this is more important other kinds of additional tiles, right? So these are redundant tiles, supporting tiles, and floating tiles, right? The main takeaway point here is that supporting tiles is the one that you should value most of the time, right? By far the most important ones are supporting tiles, right? In particular, we should keep a supporting tile when you have some weak block in hand, right? Weak blocks are those blocks that are lower in the ranking of blocks, right? The sideways protons are the strongest blocks, whereas edge-weight are the weakest one. Right. So here we have exactly 5 blocks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And all the sideways protrans, all the protrans are good, right? All the protrans are sideways. I mean, both of the protrans are sideways. So we don't need an extra block, right? Then we can discard 6 bamboo, which is supporting tile. But here we don't need any support, so we should discard 6 to keep a redundant west for safety, right? But if you draw 5 pin or 4 pin or 5 man or 6 man, you'd better keep them because they are supporting tiles, which can increase tile acceptance, right? But here we don't need floating tile, right? How about now? Again, we have 5 blocks, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. But the difference here is that now we are not completely happy about the protrans that we have. They're close to 8, right? So we may want to be a little bit greedy and more ambitious and hope to get a better sideways protran, right? In cases like this, we may want to keep a floating tile, right? So here, it's better to discard west, the safe redundant tile, and keep the floating tile, right? Yeah, just to summarize, supporting tiles are the most important, followed by floating tiles or safe redundant tiles, and the least useful ones are unsafe redundant tiles, right? When all the sideways protrans are good. So when all the blocks that you have in the hand are good, then you can keep safe tiles rather than keeping a floating tile. But if a hand has 2 or more bad weight protrans, then you may want to keep floating tiles rather than keeping a safe tile. So when you have 1 bad weight protran in the hand, it's kind of in a gray area. So it's up to you, or it's you may want to take into account other factors. But when you have 2 or more, you definitely want to keep a floating tile rather than keeping a safe tile. But and when you have 0 bad weight protrans, you definitely want to keep a safe tile, right? Another point that I mentioned is that in comparing supporting tiles, prioritize those supporting tiles for weaker blocks, right? Sideways protrans will be in less need of supporting tiles than bad weight protrans, right? So just to recap, step 1, count, divide, and count. If it's less than or greater than or equal to 5, then choose floating tiles, or choose blocks, or choose additional tiles, and then judge exceptional situations. Right, so let's do some more exercise. How many blocks are there, and what should we discard? Blocks? How many blocks?
6.
6? Right. So, oh, and the one additional piece of information is that this is Dora. So 1 block, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we only need 5th block. So this is, we can think of this as 5 blocks, 5th block, right? So what should we discard? 2 man. Okay. So the real choice is 2 man, 6 man, or 4 man, right? Why 2 man?
Because we can keep 2 fours for head if we want to found the dragon.
Yeah, exactly right. So discarding 4 man will create 2, 4, 6 shape that allow you to accept 8 tiles, 2 kinds 8 tiles, 3 and 5. But discarding 4 means that you will lose a pair when you pawn green dragon, right? So you may not want to do that. You may want to keep two pairs, right? The value of pair is maximized when there are 2 pairs, exactly 2 pairs in hand. So you may not want to discard 4. So the real choice is between 2 and 6, right? Why 2, not 6?
It's 2 is weaker than 6 by the basics.
Right, so we're not completely satisfied with this block, right? If we have a sideways program, we'll discard them, right? So after discarding 2, if we draw 7 man, then we discard 3, 5, 7, right? So it's better to have 6 rather than 2, right? 2 will not become proper sideways program, right? So this is the way to divide and discard 2, right? What about now? How many blocks and what should we discard?
4 blocks.
1, 2, 3, 4. Easily identify 4 blocks. 1, 1, 3, right? 1, 2, floating, floating, floating. 3, 4, right? So when you have 4 or fewer blocks, the choice is among floating tiles, right? So floating 2, floating 7, floating 7, floating 3, right? So which one should we discard? 2 pin? Yeah? Isolated 7 and isolated 2, obviously 7 is more useful, right? So the choice is between 2 versus 3 versus 7. 7 is next to a run, right? 3 is next to a run, 5, 6, 7, right? So 2, right? Isolated 2 is the least useful. Yeah? How about now? So we drew another 1 man. How many blocks? 5. So 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? And then 5, 6, or 5, right? Definitely 4. And then we have, definitely 5. 5, 6, depending on how to combine, how to count this part, right? So your discard choice should be from here, right? This is good, this is good, this is good, right? So choosing among 6, 8, 9, 9, what should we discard?
I would discard 9 because we already have 2 pairs beside it.
2 pairs?
Oh,
Where are the pairs?
I counted wrong.
Yeah,
Sorry,
pairs. Yeah. So we
we
just drew 1 man. We were going to discard 1 man, but then we drew another 1 man. So now what should we do? So this now became a triplet, right?
Break up the junction, 6, 8 man.
6, 8 man. So what should we
keeping
It's not
2
big,
pairs.
6 months.
6 man, right?
Yeah.
So 6 and 9 are sujis. So you may think that since you have 6, you don't need 9, but it's actually not the case here, right? Without 6, you can accept 7 anyway, right? Because of 8 and 9, right?
Yeah.
And we're keeping 2 pairs.
And we're keeping 2 pairs, right? If you discard 6, you can accept another copy of 9 and another copy of 7, right? So here, 6 should go, right? After discarding 6, let's say draw 4 pin. What should we discard?
8.
8, right?
Because we
Yeah. And then when you draw 3, 6 bamboo,
7 something.
yeah, 7 pin and reach it,
And
right?
Yeah.
discard 6 here. Right. What about now? You draw a copy of 2 bamboo. How many blocks? 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So what should we discard?
2 or
2 or 8?
I mean.
You're talking about 2 or 8 in Manzu, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So which one do you want to discard? So we're keeping 5 for now because it is a supporting tile, right?
We should probably discard 2 mana.
Yeah.
Because we can have 3 same runs of the 3 colors.
Yeah, 6, 7, 8 Sanshoku possibility, right? So first of all, first step is to notice that we have to do something with this block, right? So one rule of thumb to keep in mind is that it's better to have 3 tiles, at most 3 tiles in a given block, but there are now 4 tiles, right? So here 3 tiles in a block, 2 tiles in a block, 3 tiles in a block, 2, 2, 3, 2 tiles in a block. So this block is the one that we need to deal with, right? And then choosing between 2 and 8, since we have 7, 8, and 7, 8, there is a possibility of Sanshoku of 6, 7, 8, so we discard 2. Yeah? How about now? How many blocks?
6.
6 now, right? 2 blocks here. 3, 4, 5, and 6. And what to discard?
5 so?
5 so or 3 so, right? Depending on which one would be more dangerous. In a normal situation, 5 would be more dangerous, so we discard 5, right? So this is the weakest block. I mean, since there are 6 blocks, we choose among the blocks, and all the other blocks are strong. Sideweight here with a possibility of Ipeko, sideweight block, sideweight complete run, so we get rid of 3, 5. How about now? How many blocks?
5.
5, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, this is just, let's count it as 2 blocks, right? 2 here, 3, 4, 5. So when we have exactly 5 blocks, we're choosing between additional tiles, which could be floating, supporting, or redundant, right? What are those? 6 bamboo and 3 character. They are supporting tiles, right? Having additional 3 will allow you to accept another copy of 3 and 7. Having additional 6 will allow you to accept another copy of 6, and another copy of 7, and 3. So supporting tiles are meant for weaker blocks, right? So the question now is which blocks are weaker?
The weakest block here is 3, 3, 4 mana.
Right. So that means
We should.
so
keep
both
3.
blocks are strong, right?
Yes.
There is no weak block, but there is a weaker block,
Weaker.
right? So this is the stronger block. So this one doesn't need supporting block as much as this one, right? This is strong but weaker compared with the three-sided weight block, right? So discard 6 to retain a supporting block for the weaker one. Right? So discard 6 one, right? How about now? How many blocks?
Again, 5.
5, 6, definitely 5. Depending on how you count this, could be 6, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5/6, right? So what should we discard? 8 man, right? So first, we can easily see that there are 4 tiles in this block, right? So whereas other blocks have 2 or 3, right? 2 here, 3 here, 2 here, 3 here. So we need to do something with Man's block, right? So without 8, we can accept 7 anyway. So 8 is redundant. Or if you think of this as 2 separate blocks, then we're essentially comparing this closed weight with this. So we don't need this block. Right? How about now? How many blocks?
6.
6, right? So 1 here, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 1 redundant tile. What should we discard? Six blocks, so we're choosing among blocks, right? We're not comparing floating tiles or additional tiles, we're comparing blocks.
9 man?
9 man?
I mean 9, so
9, yeah, this one, right? So this is redundant, but we can keep them without too much loss of tile efficiency, right? Because even if we draw 7, we're going to discard 8 and 7, 8 and 9 anyway, right? Because all the other blocks are strong. We don't have to be greedy, right? We're satisfied. We're happy with the existing blocks, so we are not trying to expand, but or we're not trying to replace any of the existing blocks. So they are redundant. This is redundant, but this is also redundant. And since this is in normal situation safer than this, we should discard 8 and 9. Right? How about now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 blocks. So we are comparing additional tiles, supporting or redundant or floating tiles. Yeah? So what should we discard?
probably 8 pin.
8 pin?
If we want to stick with the current shape of the hand.
So the real question is between 2 bamboo and 8 pin, right? So this is 1 block, 1 block, 3, 4, right? So the the thing about this hand here is that this is a weak proton, and this is also weak proton. So we may want to be a little bit greedy, and we should retain a possibility of replacing these this block or this block if we get sideways proton. So comparing this with this is less useful, right? I mean, first of all, this is a part of a 4-tile combination. It's pretty strong, and this is very weak because even if we draw 3, the resulting sideways proton it's not as strong because we're using a 1 in your hand anyway, right? Drawing 4 would create closed weight, but 4 should better be connected with 5 anyway, right? So and plus this is the only pair that we have in the hand, so this will become a pair anyway. So 2 is pretty useless now. So discard 2 and keep 8, right? Right. So I think this is what I have for the first part. I wasn't expecting to finish this early, but I think it's better to keep this material for tomorrow, the coding judgment. So can I just stop here for now?
Let's wrap it up. If you have any questions about any exercises maybe, or some more, if you're in need of some more explanation, we have some time now.
Okay, so the first thing I would like to ask is when you said about our judgment of blocks, of course we should pay attention to these charts, and we should count them as the points that make blocks weaker if the tiles were discarded and we want them.
Right.
So we should just count the number of tiles our block needs to advance.
Yeah.
And accordingly move them in our ranking, just like we did with corner tiles and things mentioned below block list.
Yeah. So it's possible that the ranking may change depending on what, how many tiles are how many relevant tiles are discarded in the pond. So.
Sorry.
Right. So it is possible that some side weight protons could actually be ranked down. If, for example, 7 out of 8 potential weighting tiles have already been discarded, then it's even weaker than a closed weight where all 4 are still liable, right? So yeah, it's important to make some adjustment depending on what tiles have been discarded by other players.
And the next part of the question is on which point we should try to think about this like a sure point for us, because when we see as a sure thing for us, because we see someone discarding the tiles and we may think we will probably run on them, or at least if we want to just take this tile for us for the future, and it may backfire for us because they just discard them too quickly probably on the table. Should we think about this early tiles as a hint, or just think as I count them? It's 1 tile less for me, and that's enough, or we can just make some more information about whole our hand, just of this early 4, early 5 discarded tiles from our opponents.
Yeah, so that will depend on a lot of things. So one of the important is, first of all, whether or not the player who discarded is a beginner or somewhat advanced players. Depending on the answer to that question, if the discarder is a beginner, you may better think of it more as a noise rather than as a signal. Only when that discarder is somewhat reliable player, then you may be able to utilize that piece of information as potentially as a signal, right? So for example, when I talked about this last year, like 11 months ago, when we talked about reading, right? So for example, when someone discarded 1, then that player may have 4, or someone discarded 2 early, they may have 5, right? So that's one way of utilizing information. Or when someone discarded 1, it is not very likely that that player has another copy of 1 or 2, right? Or when one player discards 2, it's not very likely, when someone discards 2 early, then it's not very likely that that player has another copy of 2 or 1 or 3 or 4, right? So there are ways to utilize some piece of information as signal rather than as a noise. But in order to be able to do that, I think the best way is to first learn some systematic theory about what kind of thing we can read, and then next thing to keep in mind is that it can backfire, right? It can easily backfire. It's not an exact science, right? So I think my advice to players will be different depending on how advanced that player is. So if you are still learning, if you think yourself more as a beginner / intermediate, you may want to focus on a set of knowledge that you can consume and utilize in a systematic way, like the materials that I introduced here. Yeah, so reliable information, like certain information. Then once you are more comfortable with this part, then you may want to try to learn reading, keeping in mind that it can backfire. You may be surprised how easy it is to backfire, when you try to learn. Right.
Thank
you.
I also have a question related to one of the exercises. I don't remember the exact number though, so can we just go back to the exercises for a minute?
Yeah.
It was one with the ipeiko, with the double Rhiannon.
6, 7, 8?
Yeah, 6, 7, 8. Oh, this one.
Yeah.
Is there ever a case where we would keep the closed weight in sozu because of the overlapping weight, because we're waiting on 5-8 in manzu? So, for example, if 8-pin is Dora and we don't need that ipeiko, so will we then discard 6-7 man to keep this chance of getting 4-cell?
By overlap, you mean that we already have 8?
But we already have an 8, so it's not an overlapping weight, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's not overlapping, it's just that we're using it up. So that means instead of 8 potential winning tiles, we only have 7. Whereas we only have 4, right? 7 versus 4. So if there are 3 copies of 5 out, then equal, right? But still, I think this keeping this is better, even if the number of tiles are equal, because of the possibility of pinfu and ipeiko, right? And if you draw one pin, then we don't have any yaku if you keep this and discard this one, right?
Okay, I think I understand it a little bit, but you just explained it to me. And the next part is my question. What is the moment we decide to destroy the block when we see maybe our double-sided weight is now waiting only for 3 tiles? Should we choose to change the weight or keep on waiting?
I mean, I think that depends on alternatives. If you have some alternative block that is now better than a side weight block with few waiting tiles, then you should switch to the better alternative. But if you don't have better alternative, then you just need to stick with instead. Yeah?
So, for example, when we have a closed weight, edge weight, right? So 1-2 weighting on a 3, or do they also go up in rank if they give us potential sanshoku, like for example 1, 2, 3?
Yeah.
If we need points badly.
Yeah.
So I guess we could sometimes keep them over Ariana even.
Yeah.
In some cases, extreme cases.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that depends on how many points you have right now and how many Doras you have in hand, right? So because of the scoring structure, the threshold is manga, right? beyond mangan, the value of an additional yaku, additional han decreases. So if you have 2 fan already, then you can easily give up. I think it's fair to give up sanshoku, 2 han in hand, without sanshoku anyway. But if your hand doesn't have any yaku, any other yaku, and any dora, then keeping sanshoku would be a better option.